I started life as a journalist and writer. The last thing I did about 10 years ago was a book about acrobatics, because I had been doing acrobatics recreationally for about a dozen years. It certainly wasn't something I started as a kid. I started doing this in my late 40s. In any case, after doing it a long time and hanging out with amateur acrobats and also professionals, I was just captivated by the body in motion. It didn't have to be acrobats' bodies, it was the human body, and then it was also animal bodies. I was thinking about that old chestnut about how acrobats defy gravity. Nobody defies gravity, it can't be done, but you use the natural laws of the universe to do something unusual with your body. And for a very short time, it can appear that you are indeed defying gravity. If a body needed a skeleton and muscles to hold itself together in the air, then a sculpture also needed some kind of inner architecture to hold it together. And that's when I started getting much more careful and finicky about the armatures. There's a sculpture here called Harriet on Break, and it started as a sketch in the life drawing class where the model had rushed into the class. She was late, and she wasn't even posing. She was kneeling on pillows, and she started taking off her t-shirt, so it was sort of half over her head, and it was such a funny and unself-conscious pose, and not a classical pose. I guess that's what tickled me about it. When I took it to the foundry, the person who was receiving the piece said, "Well, you got to call it something. What's the title of it?" And I just kind of flippantly said, "Oh, well, she's a caryatid on break." And I was thinking of those huge sculptures that you'd see at museums holding up the roof. And I thought, well, they can't do that all day long. They have to take a break. Woman of the Garden is sitting under a huge Monterey cypress, and birds live in the Monterey cypress, ravens. The combination of the dripping from the tree and the birds are spattering the Woman of the Garden with turquoise rivulets that are streaming down her. It's wonderful. I would have never thought of that. So I'm very, very grateful to the birds and the tree. Her patina is getting better and better. And every once in a while I come out and wash her off and put on some more wax, but it doesn't ruin the turquoise rivulets. The Woman of the Garden is the biggest piece I've ever done. And she was inspired by the small piece, which I call Samantha. I'm always having kind of my own tug of war that says, if you just work on that part a little, you could make that better. And another voice says, no, but if you overwork it, you're going to take the life out of it. So be very careful. It's better to leave it rough and so that it looks like a human hand worked on it, and then you'll preserve the energy. So it's constantly a tug of war and a dialogue with myself, or an argument with myself. Finally, I'm more or less satisfied with the piece, and I bring it to the foundry, and it's a different world here. Artworks Foundry in Berkeley works in the lost wax method, and that's been around for 5,000–6,000 years. Once I bring my finished piece, or at least finished from my point of view, to the foundry, then all these people with specialized skills take over. The first thing that happens is that they pour a silicone rubber mold over my original. And the reason they do that is so that I won't lose the original. This is called the indirect wax method. Another wax positive is poured in the silicone rubber mold, and that's what will be used in the actual casting process. So I get to look at that second wax positive and make any adjustments that I want to make, and then it goes through, it goes off to be cast. They dip it in a slurry of silicone and sand. They call it a ceramic. It's kind of a colloidal silica. They first dip it in very, very fine sand because they're trying to get every single detail in the original piece of artwork. And then increasingly they dip it in coarser pieces of sand. They also attach wax rods to it, and those are called sprues. And those become the channels through which the wax melts out in the casting process and the bronze is poured in. And that's why it's called the lost wax method. So once they've got this thickened silica quartz covering all the thing over the original piece, which is called the investment. And they've got the sprues attached. The wax sculpture looks nothing like it was in the beginning. It looks like a strange sort of musical instrument or the rib cage of an unknown animal. Then the investment goes off to be cast. And the process there is that bronze ingots are melted in a crucible in a furnace. And when the ingots melt into a golden burning soup, it's so hot that the entire cauldron turns orange like the sun. So first the investment is put in a kiln, and that heats it to a high temperature, and all the wax that was in there melts out through the sprues, those canals. The investment is moved over to the casting area, and molten bronze is poured into it, not unlike the way you'd pour a soup into a bowl. The bronze is allowed to cool, and then it is very deftly hammered. It breaks open like an eggshell, and the bronze is in there. The bronze is then cleaned up, chased, meaning that the seams are smoothed out and the imperfections smoothed over. It's taken to have a patina applied. And the process is that a person who specializes in patinas dips the raw bronze in various chemicals and then oxidizes the chemicals in bronze with an oxyacetylene torch to bring out different colors, whatever color that the artist wants. And then the piece is waxed in good old-fashioned Johnson's floor wax and rubbed to a soft glow. And that's all you have to do to get a sculpture.